Turn your Bibles to Daniel chapter 11, find verse 1. This evening we are beginning the study of the prophecy of the kings of the south and north. And our foundation text is Daniel chapter 11, verse 1, where it says, "Also in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I, stood up to confirm and strengthen him." If you are reading from the King James Version, there is a vital punctuation that is missing in your version that brings some clarity to the events surrounding the giving of this prophecy. The New King James Version has a closed parenthesis at the end of the verse. This parenthesis is missing in the King James Version, the American Standard Version, the Revised Standard Version, the New American Standard Bible, and the English Standard Version. It's missing from all of those versions. However, it is included in both the New King James Version and the New International Version. It is necessary that this parenthesis be there because it gives us some understanding that is missing if it's not there. So why is this parenthesis important? It is important because it marks a parenthetical statement that begins in chapter 10, verse 21, and goes into verse 1 of chapter 11. The complete parenthetical statement reads, "No one upholds me against these except Michael, your prince. Also in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I, stood up to confirm and strengthen him." So that is the parenthetic statement that is actually there. A parenthetical statement is one that explains or qualifies something. While it explains something, it can also be dropped from the sentence or paragraph that it appears in, and the sentence or paragraph will still make sense. Let me give you a little example. John, a policeman, walked into the police station. Now, a policeman is the parenthetic statement in that short sentence. If we drop it, it says, John walked into the police station. So we see that both sentences make sense. However, the parenthetical statement, a policeman, helps us to understand something about John. So we understand that John is probably reporting for work since he is a policeman. Without the parenthetical statement, we might surmise that John is walking into the police station to report a crime or perhaps to pay a traffic ticket. So parenthetical statements are important to give meaning to the sentence. The sentence can make sense without them, but without those statements in them, we might just be a little misguided as what the sentence or the paragraph means. The parenthetic statement in chapter 10, verse 21 and chapter 11, 1 tells us something about the person said to have the likeness of a man mentioned earlier in verse 18 of chapter 10. Removing the parenthetic statement, we see that verse 2 of chapter 1 is the continuation of verse 20 of chapter 10. And it becomes obvious to us that this person, having the likeness of a man, is about to reveal another prophecy to Daniel. In chapter 10, verse 20, this person speaks of fighting with the prince of Persia and then the coming of the prince of Greece. In chapter 11, verse 2 and 3, he tells Daniel that 4 Persian kings are to come, and then the mighty king of Greece will come. So that's the complete thought through there. The parenthetic just helps us to understand who's doing the talking. And it is this person that resembles a man. The prophecy in chapter 11 concerns the Greek kings that will follow Alexander the Great. They are referred to in the prophecy as the kings of the south and north. We know that the Greek Empire was divided into 4 parts after the death of Alexander the Great. In this prophecy, only the Ptolemies and the Seleucids are involved. The Ptolemies being the kings of the south, and the Seleucids being the kings of the north. You will recall that the first principle of Daniel's prophecy is that they concern the 4 worldwide kingdoms that affect the Israelites from the time of the Babylonian captivity to the coming of Messiah. Of the 4 divisions of the Greek Empire, only the Ptolemies and the Seleucids actually ruled over the Jews. So that is why this prophecy concerns them and does not concern the other parts of the Greek Empire. Chapter 12 may or may not be part of this prophecy, but it does follow chapter 11, and it follows it as if it is included in the dialogue of this prophecy. The daily sacrifice is mentioned in verse 11 of chapter 12, that sacrifice being taken away. And that point is germane to the prophecy, so it does appear that chapter 12 is indeed part of the same prophecy. So for the purpose of discussing this prophecy, chapters 10, 11, and 12 will be considered relative to and part of the prophecy. So we are at the point that we'll be looking at chapters 10, 11, and 12 in the context of being this one prophecy. You are aware by now that the book of Daniel presents its prophecies in the chronological order in which Daniel received them. Chapter 7, the prophecy of the 4 beasts, was given in the first year of Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, in 553 BC. Chapter 8, the prophecy of the ram and the male goat, was given in the third year of Belshazzar, in 551 BC. Chapter 9, the prophecy of the 70 weeks, was given in the first year of Darius the Mede, which was 539 BC. Chapters 10 through 12, the prophecy of the kings of the south and the north, was given in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, which was 536 BC. Daniel had been given the understanding of the prophecies he received up to this time. He knew that they reached out into the future beyond his time. He had lived through the overthrow of the Babylonian Empire by the Persians. His people had been treated with relative kindness during the Babylonian captivity, and now his people were returning to Jerusalem under the orders of Cyrus, king of Persia. Even though the Jews experienced benevolent treatment under the Persians, in about 60 years, the persecution that's recorded in the book of Esther would take place. So it may be that Daniel's mourning, which is mentioned in verse 2 of chapter 10, was in anticipation of that persecution. While it would not affect him personally, it would certainly hurt the Jews of the future, a people he loved dearly. Daniel mourned and fasted for 3 whole weeks until a remarkable person appeared to him when he was by the Tigris River. In chapter 10, verse 15, this remarkable person morphs into one having the likeness of the sons of men, who brings him the prophecy of the kings of the south and the north. Matthew Henry provides more background on this. He writes, "He was now lamenting the difficulties which his people met with in the present day, but that he might not be offended in those. Daniel must be made to know what shall befall his people in the latter days of the church, after the cessation of prophecy, and when the time drew nigh for the Messiah to appear. For yet the vision is for many days. The principal thing is that this vision was intended to give the church the foresight of would come to pass in the days of Antiochus, nearly 300 years after this. Now that which the angel is entrusted to communicate to Daniel, and which Daniel is encouraged to expect from him, is not any curious speculations, moral prognostications, nor rational prospects of his own, though he is an angel, but what he has received from the Lord. Now, Dr. Henry uses the word church, which in this context means Israel under the Old Testament. And this is common usage of Bible commentators of the time, and it does not refer to the New Testament church. He also refers to the remarkable person appearing to Daniel as an angel, and implies this person's knowledge is limited to what he has received from the Lord. However, comparing the appearance of this person to similar appearances in the Bible, we conclude that this person that appears to Daniel is actually Christ. Daniel received this prophecy when he was by the Tigris River, which shows us that he was still in Babylon, even though Babylon was now under the rule of the Persians. So it appears that Daniel did not go to Persia. He sees a vision of a man in chapter 10, verses 5 and 6. It says, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose waist was girded with gold of Uphaz. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like torches of fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze in color, and the sound of his words like the voice of a multitude. That is the person Daniel saw. If you are familiar with the Bible, that description will ring a bell. This is the same description of Christ the Apostle John gave in Revelation chapter 1, verses 13 through 16, where it says, And in the midst of the 7 lampstands, one like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the feet, and girded about the chest with a golden band. His head and hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes like a flame of fire. His feet were like fine brass, as if refined in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. He had in his right hand 7 stars. Out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword, and his countenance was like the sun shining in its strength. Matthew Henry comments on the similarities. He is referring again in the book of Daniel. He says, There he looked up and saw one man, Christ Jesus. It must be he, for he appears in the same resemblance wherein he appeared to St. John in the Isle of Patmos, Revelation 1, verses 13 to 15. His dress was priestly, for he is the high priest of our profession, clothed in linen, as the high priest himself was on the Day of Atonement, that great day. His loins were girded. In St. John's vision, his paps were girded, with a golden girdle of the finest gold, that of Uphaz. For everything about Christ is the best in its kind. The girding of the loins denotes he is ready and diligent application to his work as his Father's servant in the business of our redemption. His shape was amiable, his body like the beryl, a precious stone of a sky color. His countenance was awful, and enough to strike a terror on the beholders, for his face was as the appearance of lightning, which dazzles the eyes, both brightens and threatens. His eyes were bright and sparkling as lamps of fire. His arms and feet shone like polished brass. His voice was loud and strong, and very piercing, like the voice of a multitude. And you'll also notice that the reactions of Daniel and John to this appearance are quite similar. In Daniel chapter 10, verse 8, it says that Daniel lost his strength. In Revelation 1:17, John fell down like a dead man. In Daniel 10, verse 9, Daniel heard his voice. In Revelation 1:10, John heard a loud voice, which in verse 15 was as the sound of many waters. In Daniel 10, verse 10, the person touched Daniel with his hand. In Revelation 1:17, Jesus laid his right hand on John. In Daniel 10, verse 12, he said to Daniel, "Do not fear, Daniel." And in Revelation 1:17, he says to John, "Do not be afraid." In Daniel 10:14, it is explained that the purpose of the vision is to make Daniel understand what will happen in the latter days. In Revelation 1:19, John is told the things he will see are things that will shortly take place. So you see there are striking similarities, not only in the appearance of this person, but in the response and reactions of Daniel and John. Also, notice how much the appearance of Christ in Daniel and in Revelation is similar to the appearance of the glory of the Lord seen in Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 26 to 29, where it describes this appearance. And above the firmament over their heads was the likeness of a throne, in appearance like a sapphire stone. On the likeness of the throne was a likeness with the appearance of a man high above it. Also from the appearance of his waist and upward I saw, as it were, the color of amber, with the appearance of fire all around within it. And from the appearance of his waist and downward I saw, as it were, the appearance of fire, with brightness all around, like the appearance of a rainbow in a cloud on a rainy day. So was the appearance of the brightness all around it. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. Also, notice the response of Ezekiel to the vision of the Lord is exactly the same as that of Daniel and John, where it says, "So when I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard a voice of one speaking." The coincidences are not merely coincidences. It is a vision of Christ that these three men saw. Christ explains to Daniel that he was delayed in coming to Daniel because of a 3-week conflict with the prince of the kingdom of Persia, and that he called upon Michael to help him. The meaning here is not totally clear. Some think this prince of the kingdom of Persia is an evil angel or even Satan himself. The subject of the conflict is not disclosed in the text. Adam Clarke writes of this, "I think it would go far to make a legend or a precarious tale of this important place to endeavor to maintain that either a good or evil angel is intended here. Cyrus alone was the prince of Persia, and God had destined him to be the deliverer of his people. But there were some matters of which we are not informed that caused him to hesitate for some time. Fearing probably the greatness of the work, and not being fully satisfied of his ability to execute it, he therefore, for a time, resisted the secret inspirations which God had sent him. The opposition might be in reference to the building of the temple." What Adam Clarke is saying, we know that Cyrus let the Jews return to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. And what he's suggesting here is that this 3-week struggle was Cyrus's dealing with his conscience, dealing with his mind, trying to sort out the political wherefores of all this. Christ explains why he has come to Daniel in verse 14. The reason, he said, Now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days. For the vision refers to many days yet to come. And the vision is that which appears in chapter 11, because there is no vision recorded in chapter 10. Daniel is again overwhelmed. And in verse 15, one having the likeness of the sons of men touches him and strengthens him. We learn in the prophecy of the four beasts that Michael, the Son of Man, as well as the Ancient of Days, are all references to Christ in various forms of his ministry. Appearing as the likeness of a man is an indication of Christ's incarnation. Daniel was in distress, and he needed God to be sympathetic to that stress. In Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15, we read this scripture that gives much comfort to us mere humans. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weakness, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. So Daniel needed God to be sympathetic and understanding of his human frailty. And that is why this expression of Christ in his incarnation is given to Daniel, because Christ took on humanity. Christ suffered temptation. Christ suffered stress and was able to come to the aid of Daniel. And notice his compassion as he speaks to Daniel in chapter 10, verse 19. And he said, O man greatly beloved, fear not, peace be to you. Be strong, yes, be strong. So when he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. Christ came to him in just the way he needed Christ to appear. In chapter 10, verse 13, Christ told Daniel that he had been delayed 3 weeks by the prince of Persia, who at this time was Cyrus. In verse 20, he tells Daniel he must return and fight with him. The Hebrew word fight is locham, meaning to feed on or to consume. And by implication, it means to do battle or make war. Think of this more of a battle of words and thoughts than of armies locked in conflict. Adam Clarke puts a meaningful turn on this fight. He writes, to remove all the scruples of Cyrus and to excite him to do all that God designs him to do for the restoration of my people and the rebuilding of the city and temple of Jerusalem. Nothing less than a supernatural agency in the mind of Cyrus can account for his decree in favor of the Jews. He had no natural, no political inclination to do it. And his reluctance to obey the heavenly motions is here represented as a fight between him and the angel, whom we know to be Christ. After Christ deals with Cyrus and has the Jews return to their homeland, he says that he will step out of the way and then the prince of Greece will come. Christ tells Daniel there will be a series of Persian kings before the Greeks come. This is now looking into chapter 11. In chapter 11, verse 2, he says that there will be 3 more Persian kings, and then a 4th will arise. This 4th king will be far richer than the other kings, and he will cause trouble with the Greeks. Now, we know from our study thus far that there were 11 Persian kings. Cyrus being the first from 559 BC to 530 BC, and Darius the third being the last, who reigned from 336 BC until the defeat at the hands of Alexander the Great in 331 BC. So, How do we get 4 kings out of 11 kings? Cyrus was the present king. Okay? 3 kings will follow him according to what is told Daniel in verse 2. The first to follow Cyrus was Cambyses from 529 BC to 522 BC. After him was Smerdis, who was king in 522 BC. Then we have Darius I from 522 BC to 486 BC. Now notice that Christ did not say there would be only 4 kings following Cyrus, but that the 4th king would be richer and he would stir up trouble with Greece. This 4th king is Xerxes I, known to us in the Bible as Ahasuerus. And he reigned from 486 BC to 465 BC. And Ahasuerus, Xerxes I, is known for his great wealth, and he is also the king that set up the eventual destruction of the Persian Empire by forming an alliance with the enemies of Greece with the intention of adding Greece to his empire. We studied that earlier in the prophecies. Adam Clarke confirms this for us. With regard to 3 more kings will arise in Persia, he writes, Gabriel, meaning this person we know as Christ, had already spoken of Cyrus, who was now reigning, and after him 3 others should arise. These were Cambyses, the son of Cyrus, Smerdis, the Magian, who was an impostor, who pretended to be another son of Cyrus, and Darius, the son of Hystaspes. Boy, some of these names are just impossible for an American to say. But the son of this guy, whose name starts with an H, who married Mandane, the daughter of Cyrus. Cambyses reigned 7 years and 5 months. Smerdis reigned only 7 months. And Darius I reigned 36 years. Now, as to the 4th shall be far richer than them all. Clarke says, this was Xerxes, the son of Darius, of whom Justin says, he had so great an abundance of riches in his kingdom, that although rivers were dried up by his numerous armies, yet his wealth remained unexhausted. That's how wealthy Xerxes or Ahasuerus was. And then finally, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. Clarke writes, his military strength was such that Herodotus, who lived in the time, informs us that his army amounted to 5,283,220 men. Besides these, the Carthaginians furnished him with an army of 300,000 men and a fleet of 200 ships. He led an army against the Greeks of 800,000 men and 1,207 ships, with 3 banks of rowers each. As he marched along, he obliged all the people of the countries through which he passed to join him. We know the outcome because we've already studied the fall of Persia to Greek. But this was Xerxes' downfall. Getting too greedy, trying to take on too much, and trying to take on the Greek Empire. We know that he lost, and Persia was lost to the Greeks. The remaining 6 kings of Persia are inconsequential to the prophecy that follows. Christ begins in verse 3, then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. This king is Alexander the Great of the Greek Empire. This verse sets up the following prophecy by introducing the kings of the south and north. As this prophecy unfolds, it will be seen that it covers the same time in history as the prophecy of the ram and the male goat, only in more detail as it concerns portions of the Greek Empire.